Okay. So thank you for coming, and I'm sorry it's so small. But sometimes it happens like that, but it's really great. Do you know what? Actually, hold on. It is really great to have you. And what we'll do is, we'll have a discussion, we'll record it, and I'll kind of edit it together, and we'll put it out on our on our Facebook. So I hope that that you don't mind this kind of new format. I'm Rachel, and I manage the women's campaign here at Renee Kassan. We've got somebody else coming in the waiting room. And I'll just kind of start with some brief comments, and then I'll introduce you. So I think we know that the discourse around our online lives permeates the women's sector, and it has done for quite a few years now, and for good reason, really. Whether it be in the House of Commons, in the context of the Online Harms Bill, in various women's sector coalitions, we're often all prodding at the same question: how did we arrive at a place where technology became such a prominent means of perpetrating violence against women? Fears about online safety, technological abuse, and calls for tech conglomerates to change their legislation in favour of women's safety are ringing really loudly around us, kind of in all our various women's sector contexts. And these fears are, of course, real, legitimate, tangible, surface level. But we know that there's also another side to the digital discourse. What if technology could be a tool for healing? What might that look like? And so for you, for Chayn, a global nonprofit run by survivors and allies from around the world, you create resources to support the healing of survivors of gender-based violence, creating open online resources and services for survivors of abuse that are trauma-informed, intersectional, multilingual, and feminist. And I'm really delighted to be joined by the three of you, Chayn volunteers. We've got Vesa, Madeline, and Flora with us. Vesa, a Chayn volunteer, sorry, whose background is in product management for technology. She's previously worked for socially minded startups geared around community building and workplace inclusion. Madeline, a Chayn volunteer, a freelance writer and photographer who is from the US but currently based in Montreal, Canada. And Flora, a master's student in gender studies at SOAS University, where she specializes in gender in the Middle East. She is the founder of an independent publishing house and is a practicing painter and poet. Based in London, Flora speaks English, French, and Italian. Thank you for being here. I will mute myself and hand over to you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that introduction. I am gonna, Rachel, I think in order for me to share my screen, you need to pass on the hosting duties to me. And now I understand why I had to be the host.
You're the host now.
Okay, amazing, thank you. Can everyone see my screen? Amazing, fab, okay. There we go. I'll give a very, very brief overview of Chayn. I know that Flora's going to give us a more detailed introduction. As you already mentioned, Chayn is a global organisation that is mostly volunteer run. There are a few staff members now, and we work to fight against gender-based violence and also to support survivors of gender-based violence. The structure that we originally planned for this session was to give you a taste of what our sessions together often are. So we're going to try and follow a similar format, and then if we need to veer off off piece to make it fit in with a small group, then that's what we'll do. But if we could just start with a quick round. I know you've already kind of given us intros, so maybe what we normally do is we start off with a quick round of intros, saying everyone's name, pronouns, and location. So maybe we could just do that very quickly. And MC, if you want to speak up, you're very welcome to. If you want to like type in the chat, and that's fine as well. But I can just start that off. So Vesa, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm currently in Manchester in the north of the UK, and it's snowing, which is super exciting. And I'll quickly pass on to you, Rachel, even though you've already introduced yourself, just because you're next on my little screen.
Yeah, lovely. I'm Rachel, my pronouns are she, her, and I am based in, right now I'm on the Finchley Road near Golders Green, where it is similarly cold, and I wish we had snow because at least it's something to show for the bitter golden.
Flora, do you want to go?
Sure. So I'm Flora, my pronouns are she, her, and I am in London, in southwest London, in Wimbledon, where it's beautifully sunny but still freezing cold. Winter is upon us. And I'm going to pass over to Madeline.
Hi, I'm Madeline. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm currently in Montreal, where it's actually not snowing, which is a little surprising. I hope it snows soon.
Like I mentioned, MC, you can either speak up now, or if you want to just type in the chat, that's also completely fine. Whatever you prefer.
Hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly.
Hello. Hi. Sorry, I just got disconnected earlier. That's why I rejoined the meeting. Hi. My name is Margherita. My pronouns are she, her. I'm based, well, it's a good question. Normally I'll be based in London, but it's been a little bit of a weird year, almost 2 years. So at the moment I'm in Spain, but I'm due to be back in London sometime in January, hopefully.
It has been a really weird year.
Yes.
A very, very weird year. Okay, so like I said, we're gonna thank you so much for the introductions. It's really nice to have you on board with us. We're going to try and run this as similarly to how we would run a typical session as usual, and because of the nature of Chayn's work working with survivors, we try and make both our working practices and the work that we produce be as trauma informed as possible. So we tend to start everything with a grounding exercise, and I will lead you through that now.
Okay.
So if everyone could close their eyes, or if you don't want to close your eyes, you can just kind of like lower your gaze, that's also fine. And I'll try and guide us through it. So just settle down and take a few deep, calming breaths. And if you can, try and make your exhale a little bit longer than your inhale. Now try and focus your attention a little bit on wherever your feet are. So maybe they're on the ground. Try and concentrate the energy specifically around your toes. And then scrunch your toes in really, really tight. And then release. And then once more, squeeze them really, really tight. And release. And if you can, try stomping your feet a little bit, wiggling them a little bit. And then shift your energy up your body towards your hands. And scrunch your fingers together and make little fists, really, really tight. And then release. And then once more, scrunch them together really, really tight. And release. And if you're joining us, we're just doing a little grounding exercise. So if you want to just close your eyes or lower your vision. And a few deep breaths. And we're focusing our attention in our fingers and releasing. And then maybe a little stretch. If you want to stretch your arms up above your head, wiggling your fingers, and then releasing. And then you can open your eyes. Okay, just a little grounding exercise. Let me have a quick look at my notes. Okay. In terms of the structure of the session we've got ahead of us, we have got like a little activity planned. The things that we're generally trying to get from the rest of the session is to gain understanding about the relationship between technology and gender-based violence. So as Rachel alluded to in the intro that she gave us, technology can, of course, be used to perpetrate gender-based violence, but it can also be used in healing. So we're going to explore that a little bit later on. And we're also going to learn about the work that Chayn do and how you can get more involved if it's something you're interested in. What's really important to know is that there are a few, because we're all coming from different backgrounds, like Chayn again, like it's a global organization, so there are people from all over the world. It's important to know that people are in different places in their journeys, and that might mean like specifically where they're based, but it may also mean where they are in their journey of learning about these things and how to talk about them and their perspectives on it. And it's important to just be sensitive of those differences. And of course, because we are talking about gender-based violence, some of the conversation topics that we touch on could be really sensitive and could be really triggering. So just to be aware of that. And we always say, if you want to stop for any reason or leave at any point, then that's completely welcome as well. And to look after yourself. Flora is going to give us an introduction to Chayn and talk a bit about the work that we've done, and I'll pass over to her in a second. And then after that, we'll have a little session between us where we can talk a bit about gender-based violence, both the ways it's perpetuated by technology and the ways that technology can be used to fight against it. And we'll have a bit more of a discussion around that, and then close up with some of the great work that Chayn's done. Let me just, I think without anything else, go for it, Flora.
Thank you, Vesa, and thank you so much, Rachel, for the wonderful introductions at the beginning. Just kind of in addition to mine, I am a volunteer for Chayn, but I also do work for Chayn. Yeah, that will make a little bit more sense later on, but I work for mainly the project Bloom, which I'll talk a little bit about later, and another project, some workshops that we've been doing, actual in-person workshops, but with a tech-based focus that I'll elaborate on a little bit later. But yeah, without further ado, so as you've kind of already heard, Chayn supports survivors of abuse across the world. So we are a survivor-centered organisation and a global volunteer network that started in 2013. We support those experiencing gender-based violence because we deserve the right to be free and happy. Our resources will help survivors spot abuse, collect evidence, stay safe, get well, and connect to local services, and that's globally. So to give you kind of a brief history of Chayn without going into too much depth, because obviously you can find this out, but also we just want to give you little snippets and get to the main activity. So we were founded in 2013, so about 8 years ago, and the organisation was founded by a fantastic woman called Hera Chayn. She had two friends that were trying to get divorced and leave very abusive marriages, one in Pakistan and one in the UK. Neither of them could find any information on how to do this without a lawyer, which is quite often we found the case with women who are trying to escape abusive situations. They don't have access to the kind of financial means to hire a lawyer. They perhaps don't have the freedom to do that. So it becomes very complex to actually leave your marriage. I mean, to leave a relationship also, but to leave a marriage legally is very complicated. So Hera wanted to help her friends do this, and she did a lot of research into how to go about this. And in looking into this, realized that the resources are on the internet, but just very difficult to access. So it might be that they're kind of embedded in a PDF somewhere through a link on someone's website, or, you know, there's like 5 different resources that are quite difficult to access spread across different sites. So Hera decided to kind of build a really comprehensive guide on how to get divorced without a lawyer. And so she helped her 2 friends through this process first. And when she took the divorce papers around to her friend in Pakistan, she said, "How do you feel?" And her friend said, "I have Chayn in my heart." And Chayn is obviously the name of our organization, but in Urdu, it means peace or solace. So from there, with that, Hera decided to found the organization, and she pulled together a group of friends who all volunteered and helped her kind of get it off the ground. We had some amazing people working in Tech for Good help us build the website, and Chayn Pakistan was born. So it was the first site that we had, and it had this guide that Hera created on how to get divorced without a lawyer, which is a guide we still have today. It's been kind of built on and polished, but it still exists. And yeah, it was a free resource available for people to use as they needed it. From there have been various kind of tech interventions and events that Hera's hosted. She's done hackathons, and in 2015 they launched Chayn India, which was a separate site in addition to Chayn Pakistan, and in 2016 Chayn Italia was formed, and Chayn Italia is a group of and also amazing volunteers that operate in Italy specifically, and they're kind of linked with us, but they create their own resources in Italian too. And then I guess so much has happened. It's very difficult to provide you all with a really great summary, but I think in the most recent couple of years over the pandemic, we've seen our work really change because of the nature of people being trapped at home, often trapped in abusive relationships or with abusers, and how there has been such a great need for tech resources in these situations. So in 2020, we launched a project called Bloom, which is a remote trauma support service, and also Your Story Matters, otherwise known as YSM, which is a digital companion for recovering from sexual assault or abuse. And you can download that on your phone. And again, we'll go into these resources in a little bit more depth later, but that's kind of been the main things we focused on the last couple of years, as well as different guides. And this year we've kind of continued to work on Bloom, and we're developing a partnership with Bumble to support survivors of abuse who've experienced issues on the app. And we've done a series of in-person workshops called Creative Hope, which I've been running, looking at poetry and photography as tools for healing from trauma, which will kind of culminate in a virtual exhibition, which you can find out more about on our social media. But yeah, so now that you know a bit more about our history, I can tell you about our vision for the future. So of course, our vision for the future is a feminist one. And as a team, we dream of a future where everyone in the world is free from gender-based violence and oppression, both online and offline. All feminism is intersectional and decolonial, and the internet is an open, accessible, and inclusive to all space, and a space for healing, community, and joy. And our mission within that is to ensure that the key parts of that are, and if you could go to the next slide, please, Vesta. Every survivor has access to the support and information they need, regardless of location, language, or identity. Survivors are active agents in tackling gender-based violence, because for us, it's completely key that survivors inform the support that they're given, and that we have an open feminist future for both the internet and technology. So our vision and mission are very interlinked, but they both kind of support each other. And finally, kind of our values. So again, Vesta, thank you. To ensure that we can stay true to our vision and carry out our mission to the best of our abilities, we've set a series of core values that we as a team kind of hold at the center of everything we do. So you can see them here. I won't read them out to you, but I think the most important one for us is being survivor-centered, because most of the team and volunteers are in fact survivors. So we are survivor-led and survivors creating resources for survivors. We're also trauma-informed, which is kind of underpins all of this, but really key to our practice. Yeah, I think openness is something we've developed more recently in terms of like learning how we can share resources with people in a really beneficial way, because before, all of our resources are accessible and our structure and our management team, everyone's really open. But now we're actively kind of seeking out collaboration and like working with people so we can give them our insights and give them access to like various things that we do. So that's becoming a lot more important for us as we grow. And yeah, I suppose finally a little bit more insight into how we work, which I think is quite unusual for us. I mean, just for organizations in general in the UK, I think often charities will have volunteers, but they'll be helping with kind of I suppose less like key structural issues, whereas we are a hybrid staff volunteer model. So it is unusual in that most of the work gets done by survivors, in fact, and up until this year, it was totally survivor run. Hera herself was a survivor, but we've been given a lot of funding, which has allowed us to have kind of more full-time staff members, which just makes it easier in terms of kind of getting stuff done for deadlines. As I've said, we're survivor-led. We are an official charity, so we have a board of trustees, and our founder, Hera, is involved with everything we do. But aside from that, we are quite a flat organisation. We don't really have a hierarchy. We operate in cycles, so we have 3 cycles per year, which allows us to kind of set goals and priorities for each cycle, and to have a structure throughout the year. Chayn Day is the first Sunday of every month, and it's a day where all volunteers and staff come together to do tasks, to catch up, and just to kind of work as a community. And we have work sessions once a week. So the day varies with the cycle, depending on what the community feels would be the best day for them. But we work on different tasks like social media for upcoming projects, script editing for the Bloom courses, building strategy, ideas for new courses. And that actually brings us on to our plan for today's session with all of you, which is a task that we might have done in a volunteer call. So you're getting a little taster of what it would be like to volunteer or work with us. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Madeline.
Should we pause for a second to see if there are any questions? I don't know.
Yes, of course. Sorry. If anyone has any questions, please do ask.
Who does your graphics? They're amazing.
They're so good, aren't they? This is what I always say.
Do you have a graphic designer?
So Hera actually has a lot of graphic design training, so she does a lot of it, but we also have a woman called Beatrice, who's one of our tech team, but she does also a lot of graphics.
They are the most beautiful graphics of any organization I've ever seen.
Oh, thank you.
All right, so we're actually gonna do a task together. Would either Flora or Vesa be able to share the link to the mural board in the chat? Sorry, I'm actually using someone else's laptop to use the video, so I have my computer over here with the board open.
I'll do it now. There you go.
Thank you. So if you click this, it's going to lead you to a mural board, which is a resource we often use in our tasks.
I'll also share my screen, and I've got the mural board open now.
Thank you so much. So we're basically going to do this in different parts. And so we're going to look at the relationship between tech and gender-based violence, both the negative relationship and the positive relationship. So if we just focus on, so we'll start with the negative side. So if you just zoom in, we're just going to think about ways that for about 8 minutes about how tech can perpetuate certain gender-based violence issues, the negative relationship that it has on our safety. And if we could just do that for about 8 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, so just fill in post-its, get ideas down. Any idea is a good idea. And let us know if you have any questions.
Also, Marguerite, if you've not used Miro before, then just shout if you're having any like techie issues. It can be a bit confusing if you're using it for the first time.
Yeah, no, I'm more or less, yeah, I think I figured it out. But I'll let you know if I've got any issues. I'm not like super good with technology, so
Don't worry about it. If you prefer as well, you can just shout things out and we can add them to the post-it notes. That's
okay.
Fine. Whatever.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You can also type it out, whatever you like.
Thank you.
So I think we have about 4 minutes left for the negative side.
I don't know if anyone else has a Mac, but mine sometimes makes this sound like it's about to take off. And I'm always very paranoid about it in course.
All right, so I think it's about time, maybe 1 more minute. Okay, I think it's time to move over to the positive side of the mural board. So we're gonna take a different, we're gonna now be focusing on the ways in which tech can actually help prevent gender-based violence and just ways that it's working to create a safer place for all of us for about 8 minutes too.
I think Vesa just lost connection, but she's going to come back in again.
That's right. I think I changed the settings so that you can share, you might be able to share your screen.
Oh, I can.
Yeah, amazing.
Sorry, I disappeared. It was not intentional.
No problem.
That was the wrong screen share. I'm sorry.
We have about 4 minutes left. All right. Well, I don't see anyone adding anything new. So if you like, we can go over the entire board for a few minutes. If everyone's ready.
Yeah, great.
Okay, let's take a look at what we wrote. We can look at the negative side. Does anyone want to talk about anything that they added to the board?
I didn't add this, but I just like saw it now. I'm wondering if we can maybe talk about it, is the smart home abuse. Because it is genuinely like of various concerns that I have about violence against women, the kind of rise of the
Yeah.
smart home, and you hear all kinds of horror stories about the way that Ring doorbells, for example, are used for kind of stalking and abusive ends. So I do worry about like the rise of the smart home and how it just makes just us trackable and traceable and followable.
Yeah, that's a real concern. We actually spoke about that on our call when we were preparing for this, because because the smart homes are made through technology, it's actually able to hack into it and then even lock people in their rooms, because all the doors are able to be locked just through an app. And then that creates people who have the ability to hack into that with, horrible intentions. It's definitely a new avenue for abuse that we often overlook just for convenience, and also terrifying to know that there's no other way to protect against that. Perhaps I don't have a smart home, so I don't know the experience, but perhaps if there should be some kind of option to undo it really quickly, a sort of safety option type of thing. I'm not sure. I don't have one, so I don't know if that already exists. I assume some companies would have something like that, just because of the fear that I would feel.
There is actually a really amazing resource. I'm just trying to find it, but I don't know if anyone knows EndTab, but they are an organization that fights to end technology-based abuse, and they have put up a link to, it's another resource that they are aware of, but that you can click on. It's basically a house, as if you had a smart house, and you can click on all of the different elements you might have in your smart house, and it can show you how to make sure that you have the right privacy settings, how to make sure you can check no one into it. Like, it's so fantastic, but I'll find it and share it in the chat. Great resource.
That'd be great.
I think I'm sorry.
Oh no, I wasn't saying anything.
I think what's really interesting about this stuff is, so for me, when I first heard about kind of smart home abuse, I thought that sounds really dystopian and really futuristic. And I think the main takeaway from evolving technology is there will always be some potential to exploit parts of it if that's what you're seeking to do. And what's important is just to be aware of what those points are, and not to be, overly concerned, overly paranoid, but to seek to protect yourself, to be aware of issues around privacy, to be aware of who has control over parts of technology that you have, and try and maintain some degree of, I suppose, vigilance over the information that you're sharing with people to be as safe as you can be. Yeah, like it shouldn't. I think the concern about stuff like this is that it can always be, you can always end up getting yourself into a bit of a hole where you're worrying so much. And I think the more useful thing is to think about how you can best look after yourself to a degree that is sensible, and that's kind of as much as you can do, really. Wondering if, Marguerite, do you have one that you particularly wanted to talk about?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to add things, and then when I was thinking about one, then I would see someone else writing it, so I was like, okay, yeah. I didn't write it, but the one that I was thinking about was sharing either revenge porn or sharing private images online or on, I don't know, Telegram groups. I've been following that. There's this she's an activist, she's an Italian activist that I've been following on Instagram. She is unfortunately, she was victim of revenge porn, and she had some private videos shared on online platforms and also on Telegram groups. And she's been, she's still going through all of the legal processes, which are quite difficult. She's also explaining why this is quite difficult to tackle, because I'm not too sure about the legislation in the UK, but in Italy it's not that up to date. And you still have people, and some of my friends as well, when we talk about this, telling me, yeah, but you shouldn't be doing this on the first, you shouldn't be doing this in first place. And I'm like, yeah, but this is not, again, as always, it's like, oh, she should have been more careful, or you should have been more careful, but this is not the point. Because it's not up to me to be careful. It's up, to people just not doing this because this is not right. And it's something that I get quite passionate about discussing in terms of, victim blaming and all of this, because I find that it's still embedded in the way that we think, and sometimes even growing up as women, and especially, well, I grew up in Italy, and I feel this a lot, where they say whenever there's a gender-based violence or violence against women, they always say, oh yeah, but what did she do? Yeah, and I find it quite annoying, and I find that it's a big part of the culture, really, still, unfortunately.
Yeah, it feels like no matter how far we come, the narrative of finding ways to blame women for their own abuse perpetrated against them still happens, even in such a technologically advanced age, even through the technology itself. And I think that's why, organizations like Chayn are really great, because they're actively trying to raise awareness for this, because I feel like so many people, even people I meet, just kind of accept it as it is and don't even really question why, we're still victim blaming about something as horrible as this.
No, it is true. And I've talked to a few of my friends who have, it's not that, they're not educated, they are, and they have access to all sorts of information, but I find it, especially if they're male, I find it quite difficult to make for them to understand this point, where hey, but that's not of her fault. Or that's, you can't blame the victim in general. It doesn't have to just normally only be a woman, but you can't blame them because they're the victim. But it's, I don't know, I find it quite difficult, and especially talking, and I've had a few discussions even here with some of my Spanish friends, male friends, and I'm not too sure if it's just part of the Mediterranean culture where there's some sort of machismo as well. So I'm not too sure if it's just part of that, but yeah, I've especially seen it in my Mediterranean male friends.
I definitely don't think it's just a Mediterranean thing. I think it's like a global thing. But I think you made some really interesting points. And I think one of the ones that like I find really interesting, you know what, maybe this is actually very dry, but I just a moment on it, is what you were talking about, that that activist that you mentioned who was a victim of revenge porn, and the difficulties about challenging it legally. And it is so interesting to me to see that technology is advancing so quickly, but the people who shape policies and who shape laws that can protect us against tech abuse don't really understand the technology themselves. Like I don't know if anyone's like followed any of the privacy stuff that Facebook has gotten into trouble with, and some of the questions posed to you know, some of the tech giants about what they're doing with privacy and data. The questions are just a bit embarrassing to listen to, because it's clear that the people who are supposed to be theoretically shaping laws to protect us just don't even understand what it is that they're talking about. And I think that's a major challenge that we're going to have to overcome in order to see people properly being supported legally in spaces like this. Yeah.
No, I know it is true. She had to close, like her account was blocked once, so she had to create another one. And then her account was, so it was, someone reported it again. And so she got her like lawyers involved, because they couldn't understand what she was just, you know, just talking about what, generally speaking, just making information about, sharing information on like her experience and in general educating. But her account was blocked another time, and then so she of course had lawyers involved who were questioning also the Instagram practice of doing, you know, blocking someone's account because someone's reported, and then they were like, well, on which basis did you decide that this person account had to be blocked? Why? She was just sharing educational material and maybe just announcing some of the things that have happened to her, or that she saw on the Italian TV world, because she's based in Italy, so she mainly talks about what happens in Italy. But and there are other accounts of other activists that undergo this shadow. Sometimes, you know, you can't find them online, or you type the name on Instagram and you can find them because of like shadow banning or something like this. Which is quite interesting. Or sometimes I've also seen that if I share something on my story that might be I just see less viewing compared to other, I don't know, if I share a picture of a dog or a cat. And I was just wondering, well, if you put certain hashtags, then you might see less viewings. And it's not that it's just, I don't know, just made me wonder of why this is happening, and how, you know, our posts or our stories are actually controlled by the people who work in the back. I mean, sorry, I'm really bad with technology, so sorry if you hear me like using not the terminology that is not exact.
No, don't worry about it at all. I think it is an interesting thing. I think with this kind of stuff, and like a lot of the way that content on social media is tagged is done very approximately. So sometimes things that are about violence against women is actually labeled as being sexual content, and then is flagged, and then is kind of, oh, this is not appropriate, even if it's like a support resources. And yeah, I mean, that's something that I definitely noticed a lot as well. Like a lot of people that I follow online will talk about this and about how they'll be posting content that's supposed to be supportive and useful, and actually they're just not getting the reach that they want to get because of it being mislabeled. Yeah, and I think it's like a relatively easy thing for the sort of the tech giants to avoid and ignore. I am just like, this is a really interesting topic, but I'm just a little bit conscious about time. And we've spent so much about the negative things, so maybe we should spend a little bit of time talking about the healing.
I would love to definitely talk about the positive things after this conversation, but I also just want to add the term revenge porn also kind of implies, I feel like a better way to talk about it would be intimate image abuse. Because I think that using the phrase revenge porn, even though that's so popular by the media, I think it kind of implies that she did something deserving of revenge, even if we know logically that that's not the case. Just a thought that I remember learning in a recent Chayn discussion. But yeah, anyway, so let's focus on ways that we can actually use the power of tech to heal and recover and prevent this type of gender-based abuse. Does anyone want to talk about anything specific that they wrote or someone else wrote?
I really like. We keep trying to talk at the same time. I do really like the idea of online forums and online community. I think that experiencing abuse can be such an isolating thing, and that's often the ways that abusers work, is by isolating you from people close to you. So I think the concept of being able to find community with others online is a super important one, and is like just being able to talk with people who understand what you've been through and therefore won't judge you for it. I think that's a really powerful thing. Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Rachel?
I wrote one that was about, it kind of, provides ways to sell services and make money. And I think kind of what I mean by that is anything really from kind of being able to have a platform for self-expression and sell things on Etsy, or sell things on Amazon Marketplace, or to sell things on OnlyFans, or kind of, and I appreciate that like there's perhaps a kind of we don't have time to kind of get into how our kind of discourse might change based on kind of what services or what set of services are being sold. But I think as well as kind of the possibility for healing in terms of like utilizing a broader feminist politic, I think there is something positive to be said for kind of increased and easier ways that women can sell things and and make money and generate profit. And I think that's whilst I appreciate that kind of capitalism isn't desirable, I think is helpful for women in terms of autonomy and economic autonomy as well.
Definitely, I couldn't agree more. I think financial independence via kind of tech is so important for women, particularly in potentially abusive situations and through lockdowns. I mean, for everyone through lockdowns, I guess it's been really useful, but I think you're right, like platforms like Etsy as well are really great. And I mean, I think there is a big debate going on about OnlyFans at the moment, but it can be very empowering for people who need to earn money in a certain way. But yeah, I think that is a really fantastic point and really important to highlight how the internet can just give you financial independence, which you might not otherwise have access to.
And I suppose also on like a more mainstream level, I've seen recently like a lot of banks kind of attempting to catch up in terms of addressing the possibility for financial abuse, both kind of, when you walk into a bank and access services, but also in terms of online banking as well. So I think it's great to see, as well as kind of possibilities for autonomous income generation, that we also might be heading to a place where, various big banks are going, some way to considering, how financial abuse, how they can create more possibility for autonomy.
Definitely. I stuck one in, just like snuck it in really last minute because it just occurred to me. And this was a point that we discussed earlier, which is not earlier in this call, but earlier in the conversation, which was that geolocation is like, I just found this is a really interesting concept. It was something that Flora brought up. Geolocation is typically thought of as like being this very negative thing, and it can be, in terms of being able to track somebody's exact location, knowing where they are, really susceptible to abuse. But there's also obviously the example of being able to share your location with somebody else so they know that you're safe. And I found that a really interesting example of how, like, it's not necessarily that technology itself is this terrible thing, but more that it can really be a power either for good or for evil. And it's very much down to how we shape it and how we can legislate against it, and how we can design it to be supportive as well as, not. Yeah.
Definitely. I think I agree with you as well on that. I think the number of times I've shared my location with someone being like, I'm coming home, here is where I am. And just, it makes you feel so much safer, because whilst, I don't know, your phone could be deactivated or whatever, there's a reference to where you were at some point. So that at least gives me some kind of sense of safety. On the other hand, as we said, it can have the opposite effect. And I think it's important when thinking about tech to remember that a lot of people are very wary of geolocation for those reasons. But it can, as you say, I think it's about how it's used, right? And I think reframing tech as something that can be used for good is something that, as at Chayn, we really tried to do. But yeah.
I think it's about, I agree, it's about how it can be used, but I also think critically it's like, who made it? Like, if we accept, right, that technology isn't an inherent evil, and the kind of two main things are the context in which the technology was created, and kind of the people's bad behaviors or negative behaviors, that behavior is the problem, not the tech. But I think if we were to identify the difference between contexts in which technology is used mainly for bad or violent ends, and then contexts in which, for example, the rise of these new feminist apps that that are like various get home safe ads, I think we quickly identify that the difference is, in order to, or at least from my kind of narrow experience, that in order to come to that place where you can harness technology for kind of feminist ends, we don't, I think we're learning more and more there isn't a mainstream space for that. But in order to create that, you have to divest from the mainstream technological space, and you have to find a kind of sub, feminist technological, coding culture. So I think it's interesting maybe to like identify that, where technology is made largely by men in this kind of, I guess, hyper capitalist structure, that's just not working, and that we can clearly get there to that, the kind of feminist subculture. But and I think the more sharing that subculture does, great, because you let more people in. But like maybe tech made by men is just not fit for purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked for a bunch of different tech companies, and what I will say, being aware as well, this can be shared on Facebook, what I'll say is, what I find really interesting is that one of the reasons why I wanted to start volunteering with Chayn specifically was because I wanted to not be working with a bunch of men all the time, and I wanted to be working in a different kind of atmosphere. And like, I'll say it quite openly that I was like so impressed by, like, Chayn is relatively very, definitely compared to a lot of tech organizations, very small, very limited resources, and yet the amount of work and the way they can think about work and how to do it, the quality to which it's done, is just so staggering in comparison, that there's like a lot you can do with not very much, and it's very much about kind of what is the drive behind it, and that can be a really positive message to see in amidst all the kind of general crappy stuff you tend to hear. How are we doing for time? I feel like we're doing pretty badly.
Yeah, I think it's about time to move on.
Okay.
So thank you everyone for helping us with the Miro board. That was such a nice discussion, and let's move forward. And so let me just say, tech can and is used to perpetuate gender-based violence. It can also be used for healing with trauma-informed design and an intersectional survival-led approach. Technology can help to create transformative spaces for healing from trauma, as we just discussed. And next, I'm giving this to Vesa.
Okay, yeah. This is just me a quick. Oh, sorry, my screen just went black. There we go. It's back. This is just a quick run through of various. We've already touched on some of these, but various different ways that abuse can be perpetuated in the tech space. So we already talked a little bit about smart home abuse, which is obviously new and emerging. I think we'll all be familiar with some of these. I think some of them we're slightly less aware of, maybe. So for example, when I was looking into these and doing a little bit of research around them, digital morphing I wasn't familiar with, and deep fakes I had very limited understanding of, but they're essentially when you are able to manipulate images or videos and make them appear like something else. So photoshopping an image, for example, so that it appears quite different to what it once was, or taking a video and changing the audio and manipulating the appearance of it so it looks like someone is actually saying something else. There are also things like, there are more traditional forms of things. So doxing, for example, is when you share someone's personal information, like their address or their home number or something, on a public forum, which makes them really open to abuse. All of this is just to say that as technology expands, as we already said, the ways that people can use and misuse it grow and expand as well, and they can get more and more sophisticated. And none of this is really something to be said to be super frightened of, but more to be aware of the information that you're receiving, to be aware of the privacy settings on different tools that you have, and just generally kind of take what you see online with a pinch of salt about the intention by which you were intended to receive it, and how true it is, because the online world is open to being manipulated and to being changed. It's like any other form of media, I suppose. I think that's everything I wanted to say there. I don't know if I've missed anything. Yeah. We've talked a lot about bad stuff, so I think this is where I'm going to hand over to Flora, who will talk a little bit about some of the great work that Chayn has done to try and support people who operate in the space.
Thanks, Vesa. Yeah, so as we've kind of said, I think where there is trauma, there is room for healing. And at Chayn, we are trying to kind of spearhead that. So forgive the slightly violent turn of phrase. As I said it, I thought that's actually not a very nice phrase, so I need to reconsider my language. But so we're going to give you just like a quick kind of introduction to the Chayn website if you're not already familiar with it. This is kind of the home for all of the resources that we create. It's chayn.co, pretty easy to remember. And we have like over 200 resources on here in more than 14 languages. So we've tried to make it as accessible and as kind of widespread as possible. And we're making new resources all the time. Resources, when we create them as well, it's something that we kind of come up with as a team, we work on as a team, and we edit as a team, and then we approve as a team. So it's all community-based. We'd like to do it with everyone because the team is completely global, so we get lots of different cultural like inputs and kind of perspectives, so there's like a rigorous process that everything gets to before it's actually published onto our website. But yeah, just to go on to the next slide, we have so many different resources. This kind of page gives you like an insight into different topics, and then when you click on the separate topics, it will give you kind of more in-depth breakdowns of what each resource is. And you can see here, like we kind of have key sections that we've worked out are the most important for survivors, those being things like sexual trauma, legal rights, safety online, and then we have a separate site for LGBTQIA plus community resources, because that's a specific set of kind of separate issues that we wanted to give the right platform for. And then, yeah, even supporting loved ones, which I think is a key one as well. We have something called the Good Friend Guide, because I think a lot of friends and family of survivors really struggle with how to kind of talk to their loved ones about it and to help them through it in a good way. So that guide has been a really popular one for us. Yeah, and moving on to Bloom. So I've touched on this before, but Bloom is something we launched in 2020 and was pretty influential. But yeah, I'm going to hand over to Madeline to talk about that a little bit more.
All right, I'll just give a background about Bloom. So Bloom originally began as Chayn's trauma resilience group, and it was called Notes from Chayn. And then as we adapted to a therapy group, the organization planned to run in person into online medium at the start of the COVID-19 lockdowns. With social distancing, quarantines, and border closings, life can feel frightening and uncertain. This was especially true for anyone living in an abusive household or working on recovering from trauma. Being forced to stay at home with an abuser for long amounts of time can be harrowing, as survivors well know, and stress of any kind can act as a trigger for violence and coercion, putting survivors at an even greater risk when trapped inside with abusive people. And people still healing from abuse or sexual trauma were also often not able to go to their trauma group or therapy right now due to the COVID lockdowns. So this was our method of providing them with the coping mechanisms for the first shutdown, and still going on to this day. At the time, we served 100 people from around the world. And yeah, and we try to cover all possible issues. So as you can see, we have 5 different courses, and they're delivered via WhatsApp or Telegram. There's weekly videos, daily messages, direct live chats, and it's all anonymous. And there's a lot of, and on the right side of the screen, you can see a list of different courses that we provide through Bloom. So yeah, thank you.
Another tool that we have is called Your Story Matters, so YSM. This is like a little app, so either a web app or an app that you can get on your phone, and it's essentially a companion to any survivor, so they can have more immediate access to support resources. So if Bloom is more of a course that you take in a set time frame, this is more kind of that you can just access whenever you want. There's a little meditation app in it. There are tools. And it's just kind of like a quick relief, if you like. And we have another platform. This is a bit of an older one called Soul Medicine. That is basically just very short courses. So again, not dissimilar to what Bloom does, but more kind of very quick tasters for different topics that can teach you how to protect yourself, your online presence, and your privacy. What's really, really sweet about it is that you could also sign up to receive messages and newsletters that would give you positive daily affirmations or support, and you could have a option that meant that the way it would appear in your email inbox or in your messages was like a vitamin company, so that it was kind of hidden away if it was something that you need to be private, but just like a sweet little like a big part of this is to try and support people and feeling less alone and feeling like there are people who care about them and feeling supported. So it was a mechanism to do that. And then lastly, just wanted to talk about the fact that, of course, Chayn is mostly volunteer-led and was like completely volunteer-led until very, very recently. There's a lot of text here, which I will not read out, but you can kind of read through it if you're interested. Obviously, Flora, Madeline, and I are all volunteers, and we're always open to new volunteers, and I think it's a really interesting thing to be a part of, partly because the work that the organisation does is so great, but also partly because what I find really interesting is just seeing such grassroots activism, how it's shaped, and being part of it, and getting to be involved, meeting so many great people, and feeling part of a community, and also just seeing the sheer volume of work that you're able to put out. It's really, really awesome. I know that I definitely have felt that I've learned a lot of things, both in terms of the content that we produce, but also just in how to work and like the mechanism of like how you can come together to create things. It's a really cool thing to be a part of. But I've done my little spiel, so like I'll see if Madeline and Flora want to say anything, and of course we're open to any questions.
I just want to say I've had such a great experience since I joined Chayn in the summer. It really helped me during the lockdowns to have something to work towards. It gives me a lot of purpose, something I care so deeply about too, that's affected so many of my loved ones. And yeah, I'm also grateful for today too. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, similarly, I've had a fantastic experience volunteering with Chayn. I volunteered for 2 years until I started working as staff, and I still do volunteer as well. And I think, same as Madeline, I think during the lockdowns, it provided such a great sense of community and a sense of purpose too, during a time where it felt really hard to actually kind of feel like you were engaging and helping people. So yeah, it's been a really fantastic journey, and every day when I'm working, I feel like I learn so much more information and learn so much about myself as well. So it's been really fantastic to be part of, such a brilliant team.
I'm pretty sure the next slide is just question. Oh no, next steps, but also questions. But for next steps, here's the website. Always open to volunteers. More importantly as well, like if you know people in your networks that might be interested either in volunteering or that may benefit, if you know of any survivors, we're always wanting to improve the outreach that we have to as many people as possible. So we'd really love for you to be able to share that with anybody who may find the work that Chayn do valuable. We're on a bunch of social media: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. I think not super active, but yeah, don't think we're on TikTok. Yeah, that's it. Questions? You're on mute, Rachel.
Sorry, we just got a brand new work laptop and very different to my silly Mac, so I'm just kind of every button's in a different place. I just wanted to say, just to thank you all so much. It's not the first time that I've been privileged enough to hear about the work of Chayn, and you know, to be honest, and we were designing New Horizons Festival with an explicit focus on inspiring hope and looking, you know, beyond certain parts of the women's sector discourse to find kind of new possibilities, new sources of hope. It was really a no-brainer that we invited Chayn to come along. This is, you know, the ultimate visioning exercise, the ultimate kind of looking over the horizon, and for women's rights, looking over the horizon of, you know, our technology discourse at the moment, and finding sources of hope and possibility. So I can't thank you enough, both for your brilliant presentation today and in general for the amazing work and volunteering that you do. It's, you know, certainly just changes lives clearly. And I think in particular, the Bloom service is just absolutely fabulous. And also best of luck with the amazing Bumble partnership. How exciting. I hope that it's productive and enjoyed by everybody. MC, I wonder if you have any questions before I say final thanks and end the meeting.
Sorry, I was speaking and I was on mute as well. Sorry. Yeah, no, because I found out about Chayn through Chayn Italia, because during the first lockdown I was in Italy, and then I was, you know, on furlough, and I was like, okay, I can go through some things that I like. And then that's how I found out about Chayn. And I actually told about this to a friend of mine who started volunteering with Chayn in September. Don't know if anyone knows him, Sam from...
Is that Irish Sam?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he started, but yeah, I'm really happy that he started volunteering with you, because he's really passionate about this, and he's got a great brain, so I'm really happy. But I just wanted to ask, how does it, because he told me that there are like different